first thing I noticed was your last name, Yoffy, Hebrew. Yes?
Yes, yes, yes. It means beautiful in Hebrew.
Is that a family parent, family husband? How did you get that name?
Parent. It's actually I have a very bizarre name situation where my this is complicated. So my maiden name is Badnock, and so my I was
That's a
born.
horrible name.
I know, it's Scottish. I
I'm so
was
sorry. I
named
mean, I apologize to your parents, but like, that's a
I
horrible
was
name.
born Jennifer Marie Badnock, and my parents got divorced when I was young, and my mom remarried Jimmy Yoffy. And when I was getting close to getting married, I legally changed my middle name from Marie to Yoffy. So then I was Jennifer Yoffy Badnock, and I like framed the change of name certificate for him, and he cried. It was beautiful. And then because he raised me, and then even though I still had a relationship with my dad. So anyway, Jennifer Yaffe Badnock. Then I got married and I was Jennifer Yaffe Schwartz. And then when I got divorced, I didn't want to go all the way back to Badnock. So I just dropped Schwartz and now I'm Jennifer Yaffe, which is a name I never had before. And also, I don't have a middle name, but I'm taking suggestions. I can choose whatever I want.
There's absolutely no need. As a matter of fact, I've had this discussion with my wife. Like in the Czech Republic, they don't have middle names, period.
Hmm.
Like they just don't use middle names. It's not a thing.
I kind of I'm flexible, like sometime for a while I'm like, maybe it'll be like rainbow. And then one friends decided it should be Francesca. And so I went with that for a little bit, but generally I have no middle name. It's just Jennifer Yaffe.
It's fine. But now a lot of the story of your life makes a little bit more sense because I was looking at the name of the gallery that you used to run and I was like,
Yes.
who's Schwartz?
Yes. That was me for 15 years.
Okay.
And then still me, just different name.
That is one of those odd difficulties that women have that men don't have. Like we don't change
Mhm.
our names generally. Some of us can choose to, but generally don't. But women sometimes do change their names, and that's sometimes professionally a bit questionable because like you can't build a reputation on your name if your name changes.
Yeah, it's true, and it's also, like, when you're going through divorce, you don't wanna make this, like, big announcement, like, "Hey, let me tell you what's happening with me and why my name is" I just changed it and just eventually people figured it out.
I would go with it's pretty obvious, I think, but I guess if I had never heard the name Jaffe in your presence before, it wouldn't have been a bit random at first.
Uh, yeah, so here I am, Jennifer Yaffe.
All right, so just a little bit of background on you. So, like you are a photographer, a publisher. You've run a nonprofit. You've written a book. You have, let's see, run an art gallery. What else have you done that I'm unaware of?
Let's see. I did I had a company where with a co-founder where we ran retreat programs for photographers for a while, for several years, and that was fun. We published a few books with that as well. But that's the general gist at a gallery. Oh, I used to have a portrait photography business, like a family portrait photography business in Atlanta for years and years, which helped fund the gallery since it's less profitable.
I'm sorry, which is less profitable?
A gallery is less profitable, more enjoyable, but a lot of work. And, yeah, so the gallery and I got really interested in arts engagement. So, like, how do you get people that aren't buying art to buy art and to value it and to wanna collect it and, have a connection with the individual artists, and that's how I started doing all these programs at the gallery that was the focus, and then, getting people in the door, getting them interested, having them meet the artist in unique ways, in ways that felt less threatening maybe, and then that, spurred this ridiculous idea that like, "Oh, well, this is great that I'm getting people to come to me, but what about people that art isn't on their radar? How can I reach them?" And so I did a Kickstarter, like, in the early days of a Kickstarter before when artists knew what it was and were already kinda sick of it, but regular people didn't know, and so I was did a Kickstarter to raise money to buy a Volkswagen bus, and so artists were kinda like, "What?" And my parents' friends were like, "You want us to give you money to buy a car?" And I was like, "Kinda, but I'll send you a postcard."
It's a really cool car,
Yeah, yeah. It'll break down every day, but it looks adorable in the logo, and
but it can be fixed with a wrench and duct tape.
if I was a mechanic, yes, but
Really, you
other
bought a
people,
VW bus and you couldn't even repair. I mean, those are so
no.
easy to repair. I don't even repair
Yeah.
cars, and I can repair that car.
Well, I should have brought you along for the ride then.
Did it break down a lot?
Yes, almost every day. It was just a series of miracles that we got from one place to the other and the kindness of mechanics. Um, and then, yeah, so I did this bus tour and where I was like, why don't instead of trying to get people to come to me, I can go out there. And we did 10 different cities where we did pop-up exhibitions with local artists and gave away photography, and then came back and closed the gallery and turned that one project into a nonprofit organization called Crusade for Art that I ran for 4 or 5 years. And the main initiative was a $10,000 grant that we would give to the most innovative idea to connect new audiences with art. And I started publishing. I did the retreats also in that time. It was very busy. It was very photo focused and busy and wonderful. And now I'm just publishing, which I love. It's kind of like the best parts of all of the things that I've enjoyed, like kind of helping artists get their work out, making something beautiful, being a part of that, working with artists that I'm really inspired by and love, and building those relationships, and less of the stuff that I didn't like throwing a party, an opening every 6 weeks and hanging things on walls and trying to sell pieces to people that don't want it but should.
All right. Well, our lives seem to be sort of very similar in many ways because I used to run a public arts program where we did public sculptures because
Oh, wow.
I was in the thought of the idea that basically people don't have art in their lives, so let's put it into their life. So, like, I would
Mhm.
literally put, like, steel sculptures, but we did them as temporary things because the community didn't really know what it wanted, kind of thing. They didn't know what fit and all this kind of stuff. So the idea was to educate them to like what kind of a sculptural thing would end up fitting there. And in the end, after I left the program continued on. And after that, the city ended up buying a bunch of sculptures and permanently installing them and
Oh,
stuff. So
that's so
like,
wonderful.
yeah, I mean, like after I left, it succeeded. That seems to be like the thread of my career is basically that I start off some really cool thing, and then once I leave it, it becomes successful. So yeah.
You're an
Now,
activator.
is that the good thing or a bad thing?
That's a good thing. It's a
Okay,
great
great.
thing.
I'm all for it then. So, what about running a 501c3? Because mine was also a nonprofit. So, what were your experiences with that?
It was a lot of, work. I don't like raising money, so it kind of
I don't like asking for money.
I don't like asking for money, so I think that if I had to do it over again, I don't know if the advantages outweighed the disadvantages, having to have a board and, have all of the governance and trying to ask people for money when we could have just sold something and it would have been easier, I think. But, and then getting the 501c3 status and all of that paperwork was a whole adventure.
Yeah, I see. I didn't have problems with getting the status and even keeping the status. My biggest problem was I didn't learn. I didn't even learn. Nobody told me until like about 7 years in that, like, oh, it's all about your board. Your board has to be like active. And I was like, oh, because like I just
Yeah.
got like a passive board. I was just like, I just need some people legally on the document.
Right, right.
And that was a horrible mistake.
Yeah, and I found that what I was doing specifically was just really hard to, fundraise for, to ask money for, like, in people like the idea of, yes, there should be more art collectors and people should value art, but in the hierarchy of things that people wanna give away their personal money to, it's like, that's a nice idea, but we could have done print sales or, something that would have raised the money faster, easier, probably, than me asking people one off for, like, $500 or $1,000 for something that they were kinda giving the people that gave kinda gave because they liked me, not because it was, like, a bit and that's a lot of pressure too, and a lot of lunches. So many lunches, coffees, and being charming and smiling a lot. It was hard.
It is. It's exhausting sometimes to like be a
Mhm.
show pony in any
Mhm.
version of the arts. Like whether it's being the artist at an art opening or whether it's being somebody asking for money for your nonprofit. That's the one part I wish we could find a way to not have in the arts anymore.
Mhm, mhm. I mean, honestly, it's like a part about publishing that I really love. It's much more behind the scenes and, other than sitting at a book fair, that's a whole other thing.
Feel free to share stories of book fairs.
Well, it's just sitting for a really long time, and occasionally, you'll have a great conversation or someone comes up and they're actually asking questions about the books, but 9 times out of 10, it's an artist that walks right up, looks you in the eye, and says, "I have a book that I wanna get published. Are you interested?" And I'm like, at least look down, flip through the books, maybe buy one. Like, buy me dinner first, like, don't just come up like, oh, tell me about your publishing imprint because I might want to get my book published. I'm like, oh, would you? Like, am I auditioning for you right now? Like, can you move out of the way? Someone might want to buy something. You're blocking my table.
It's a story I hear all too many times, whether it's an art fair, a book fair, or whatever, where basically a lot of it is people going there trying to do something for their benefit instead of
Yeah.
something for your
Yeah.
benefit. And it's just
Yeah.
like, ugh. Don't get me wrong. I did that when I was a kid, and because we think that that's the easiest access to these people.
And I appreciate someone saying like, "Oh, I have a bunch of these books. This one's my favorite. This is what I like." Like flatter me. I'm good with that. But to come up and ask me, "Oh, tell me about your publish. What kind of books do you publish? And what do like?" There's the
There,
internet. You
there's
could
a
just do some.
table right in front of
Yeah.
you.
Feel free to peruse. Yeah. Yeah. So that's an annoying piece of it. And I mean, I get it, but it's also like it's not a thoughtful approach.
Indeed. Now, I want to take a step back though. Like, so looking at your CV, you have a BA in psychology, an MA in counseling. How did you
Mhm.
get into the arts?
Because artists are crazy. I'm kidding.
Fair. No, that's fair. Yeah. Okay.
No, I've always been into art, and, honestly, it's, been such a bizarre and I think I told you too, my day job is in strategy and branding, and so it kind of in a way, they all connect in my mind, but it's a little bit harder to grasp from the outside, I think. I love thinking about how people think and how they approach the world and what they're interested in and how to communicate with them in a way that will resonate. So that's the strategy piece, that's the branding piece, that's the part about um, my art experience of like starting and running for arts businesses or nonprofits that I loved, kind of that thinking and, who's the audience and who am I trying to connect to? And also in helping artists work through that problem too, like what is your work? Who's the most likely person to appreciate it and want to buy it, and kind of thinking, how can you reach those people? What connection points do you have to them already? What barriers do you need to get around, do you have to get around to getting them? And so, um, all of that connects and all of that is really related to like the psychology and counseling piece too, just kind of putting yourself in the shoes of the other person.
Well, these days, I feel like more so than, let's say, any time in the past, artists have to be better, more efficient strategists, marketers, and business people, more so than we ever have. Like, all of my professors and all the people I knew when I was young who were artists and creative and stuff, they were generally stoners and just sort of like let their gallery or their representative do all their stuff. And they just sort of lived this, bohemian lifestyle. Whereas now we have to be strategists and marketers and business
Yeah.
people, and in a much more fast paced and sort of very important way. And I don't like it.
Most artists don't like it. It's a lot. I mean, it's a completely different skill set than the creative part.
It's the reason I chose not to be in it.
Right, be in business, sure.
That's right.
Um, yeah, I get that, and I think too, a lot of artists think like, "Oh, if I just get a gallery, they'll do that for me, or if I'll get a publisher, they'll do that for me," and
Not anymore. They may have
not
in the
anymore.
past, but they won't anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's and just navigating social media and how much work do you put out there and not and how much do you hold back, and, there's a lot. I mean, you're a personal brand, and there's a lot that goes into that.
You know, it's funny. When I was in school, my teachers used to always use the term reputation. It's all about your
Mhm.
reputation, which I believe now can be easily translated to the idea of being a brand.
Mhm.
But in the arts, we don't like using the word brand because it sounds sell out, corporate-y, all kinds of
Right.
things that are the antithesis of what we are.
Right.
But it's basically the same thing.
It is, and I mean, I think, it doesn't mean that it has to be or should be fake, Like, I think that if you are your authentic self and you put that out into the world, that is your brand. I mean, it's your reputation, it's the impression that people have of you. But because it's so easy to look into other people's lives, I mean, it used to be, before social media, before the internet, like, you'd go to a gallery and you'd see people's work on the wall, like, you don't think about the artists that are creating it, like, you don't think about the person behind the work, and now it's like the person's first, the artist is first, and then you see what they're putting out in the world. And so it's a different thing, and it's just about being yourself, is hopefully yourself isn't an asshole. But, even if it is, that's some people like that, I guess. Um, but, it's, people, I guess also it's because we are used to even, like, celebrities and I mean, everyone that's in the public eye in any way, you kind of get to know more about them as a person, not just, like, the character they play on your favorite TV show or the book that they wrote or the piece of art that they created, and so people are looking for that type of connection with the artists, not just an individual piece of work.
No, and it's interesting. I mean, I'm not saying I'm against it, but like to a certain extent, like ironically, since I run a podcast and share way too much about my private life, I'm kind of a private person. Like I don't really want people knowing, like everybody has like a facade that they put up a little bit. And unfortunately, I think that like social media has taken it too far. I think now it's curated perfect lives, even
Mhm.
artists in their studios, their perfect careers, kinds of things. That is not the reality of it, I don't
Yeah.
think. And so like I have no problem with showing all my problems, faults, and foibles through a podcast because that's sort of like me. But like showing pictures of my mistakes and my foibles, somehow I'm not okay with that.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I mean, I wonder too if, we humans, Americans for sure, but, when I was doing the art stuff and when I was doing the nonprofit of, like, trying to get people to connect to art, a barrier about young people buying art was that they didn't feel like they were educated enough about art to buy it. So they felt like, well, I don't have an art history degree. I don't really know what I'm looking at. And, I could say, just get what you love. Like, you want to just look at it and feel something. But then they were like, how do I know it's worth this amount of money? And, but a substitute for that knowledge gap was meeting the artist. So having a personal connection with the artist and being like, "Oh, I talked to the artist and they told me the story behind this work," or in substitution, the gallery owner told me about the artist and the story behind this work. And then maybe they start following that person on social media and they feel like they have a connection to them and it makes them comfortable buying the art. And so I do think that there is an advantage there in terms of, as an artist of, sharing yourself and being authentic and putting, the stories behind the pieces. I actually just bought an Alex, so the Magnum print sale that they
Yes.
do, the square prints that are like $100, and um I don't have any of Alex Soth's work, and I really admire it, and I just interviewed him on the podcast, and that so anyway, I saw this,
And
piece on the
published a
prints.
book of his.
I didn't publish a book of
You
his.
didn't? I could have sworn I saw you did. Okay, maybe I saw it as the podcast.
I would like to.
Everybody would like to.
He's delightful. He is so wonderful. So, anyway, I saw on Instagram that, he posted about this photo that he had for sale on the Magnum print sale, and he told the story behind it. And I was like, oh, I mean, I loved the image and I've liked it for a long time. It's from Sleeping by the Mississippi. But hearing, for me, even, and I know a lot about art, but hearing the story behind that photo was what made me buy it ultimately.
I'll tell you, I had this $1,000,000 idea. Well, it's not really $1,000,000 idea, but I had this podcast idea that I was going to do a thing like what you're talking about, like a story behind a piece, like find an individual piece of art and a living artist and have them tell just the story
Oh,
of
that's
that one
fun.
piece of art. So like a nice little short form, 10, 15-minute little story. That's the whole podcast and that's it. So like one piece of art, a living artist tells the story. There you go.
I like that.
It would be neat.
Yeah, that'd be
Yeah,
a
I haven't
good
done
way
that
to get back into the perfect bound, because I'd be like, these are short segments, so I could wrap my head around it.
Well, it's an interesting idea because, like, a lot of times, there'll be some famous thing that's got, it's sort of taken on a life of its own in the world, but there might be some completely different story, or maybe that is the story. I don't know. And so, like, hearing the reality of what that one single image that is maybe like the iconic thing of a particular artist.
Yeah.
The story behind it, either behind it from before, behind it as far as like how did it become this thing that became your iconic whatever, but like a nice little short form thing but focused on just one image.
I love that.
Please don't steal it. I just
No, you do it.
been holding on to it for a while.
It's all you. You got
Okay,
this.
good. Okay, lovely. I'm kidding. Anybody, I mean, it's not some unique idea, but anyways, going back to your publishing stuff, one thing I really do love about your publishing house is it a house? Would that be the right term?
Sure.
Sure.
Imprint? I don't know. I don't know
Imprint.
what the difference, and then I don't know what the nomenclature is.
What do you call it? Just Joffrey Publishing?
Yoffy Press, yeah, just
Joffrey
publishing.
Press. Okay, press. We'll go with press. So the one thing I do actually really love about it is the price points. Because all too many artist books are extraordinarily expensive. And like, I mean, as much as I love any particular artist or even, buy as much as I can from a particular press because I like what they produce kind of thing, a lot of them are really expensive. And I like that you seem to keep yours. I think the most was like $50.
Yeah, most of them are like between 35 and 50. It's hard though. I mean, especially I have some books coming out that are big and size and page count, and they cost a ton of money to make.
So as I just applaud you for this, you're like, yeah, but I'm about to come out with more expensive stuff.
Don't get used to it. No, I mean, I think it's important to have a range. And I mean, it's also like the material costs are so high. It's so expensive to make a book. And so, and a lot of times we price it based on like what it looks like it should be, not necessarily what it costs. Like there's, this is a soft cover and it's only, this many pages and whatever, like we're just going to charge $30 for it, even though this is actually really expensive to make because it's got these special things in it and whatever, but like the size and the material, it makes it seem like, well, it would be hard. We want to sell them. We want people to have them. Part of nobody's making money anyway. So the whole point is just to get books in front, in as many people's hands as possible. So try to do a price point that makes sense for that.
I mean, that's one of those things that a lot of people have a horrible misunderstanding and misconceptions about, the thinking that like book publishing is some like great money making scheme. It's really not. And I mean, outside of maybe some of the big publishing houses kind of thing. But like when you're talking boutique ones such as yourself, which I say as a compliment, please don't take that in any negative way.
No.
But like a boutique press, like they're basically happy if they're breaking even because there's just not a lot of profit margin.
Yeah. Oh, no. Not at all. I mean, not at all. I just got an invoice today for a book that's staggering. Staggering from the
Like
printer.
mortgage your house staggering.
I mean, it's so much money, and that doesn't even include, like, the designer and the distribution and, order for like, all PR, like, all of this other and, costs associated with getting it out.
Okay, but wait, let's go back a step because I want to hear a little bit more about some of the logistics. I love these like nut and bolt logistics about like publishing of stuff.
Sure.
When you publish a book, what quantity do you publish in?
That is depends. So the smallest I'll do is 250, and that's the triptychs that I make, and those are digitally printed in the US. So, but if I'm printing offset, which is in Europe somewhere, usually in the Netherlands, it's a you I think the smallest I would do is 300 or 350, and the most I've done I think is 1,000.
Well, because I mean, even like the quote unquote sort of like best places to print, which is best is subjective based on quality and price and all that kind of stuff. It changes a lot. Like, because like at one point in my career, I remember Turkey was like the best place to print, and then
Yeah, I printed
France
in
was really amazing.
Turkey. I printed in Korea, Turkey, Spain, Netherlands, and the US.
I've always found the U.S. to be the most expensive.
Oh, it's insane. Yeah, I only print digitally in the US, and the binding, you can't do hardcover. But, in the Netherlands, the binderies are so good, and yeah, it's been between Spain and Netherlands, the last couple of years, kind of alternating, but it keeps skewing more towards Netherlands.
It's fascinating how that changes geographical locations so much. I mean, I wonder if there's like some legal, like tax things or customs things that sort of make it easier and cheaper in certain places versus others kinds of things.
Yeah, I don't know. I have a friend that prints, a lot of his books in Lithuania. I mean, and, sometimes publishers bid it out to a bunch of different people, or it's like, okay, this printer I know does great black and white work, like duotone, and then, like, I printed a couple books in Italy, forgot about that one, mostly duotone work, and then it's like, well, this one has this special kind of paper, or this one can do this special design thing that I want, and this one can't,
For
so
anybody listening who don't know what duotone is, that would be equivalent to like black and white, two color.
Mhm, mhm. Yes.
Giving some jargon just in case people don't know.
Um, so so yeah, it just depends, and it's expensive, but it's beautiful, and I love it. I call it, like, my super expensive hobby, essentially. So it's like my second full-time job that I hope at the end of the year I break even, and I spend an enormous amount of time doing.
Yeah, but it's time that makes you happy
So
mostly.
happy, so happy, mostly so happy.
More happy than unhappy.
True, true. I happen to have a lot of books all coming out at once right now, so it's been really stressful for many months. Things that, like, either the artists got delayed because of COVID, like, kinda put a halt on them making the work, or, material delays or shipping delays, and it's just this perfect storm of, like, I have 4 advanced copies of books sitting on my counter that are in some stage of on a boat coming, so they're all gonna get here, like, around the same time, which is a lot to get out in the world, and then, you know, a couple of others that are, like, designed and about to go to press or yeah, but it's just gonna be a and then, like, I can't commit to anything coming up because I'm so overwhelmed with the number of books I have now, and then I'm gonna be like, "Oh, wait, I got nothing in the pipeline." Oops.
Well, I mean, and that's another thing that's like a lot of the difficulty of doing something like this. But I mean, even just being a creative artist, like when you put something out into the world, you already have to be working on the next thing. Like you can't just sit on your laurels and be like, okay, those are done, marvelous.
Yes. Ta-da. Right.
No, you have to be working on planning for thinking about the next things because like to a certain extent, just like you were talking about like social media and branding and stuff, like you have to maintain that brand. So you have to be perpetually bringing things out on some regular schedule, yearly, quarterly. I don't know how frequently you do it. How frequently do you publish a book?
I don't have a set schedule or it just has been kind of organically as things have come together, which is how this happened. Um, but I think I've been publishing like 6 to 10 books a year.
That's a lot.
I know. I would like it, I think, to be like 2 to 4, ideally.
Yeah, that's a lot of books.
Yeah, I get excited, I, like, see something, and I'm like, "Oh my god, I can do it, I can do it, I can fit it in, it's amazing." But I need to slow my roll.
Well, which begs the question, which of course all creative people want to know, is like, how do you make the decision of what to publish versus what not to publish?
There are many factors. First, I take submissions on the website or, email people email me submissions, and I review them, like, kinda quarterly, and I do respond to every person, so that's time consuming. Um But I do look at everything. A lot of times sometimes it's work that I'm just seeing out in the world and I'm really drawn to, and so I'll approach an artist. Sometimes, an artist comes to me, like, through a recommendation of, somebody else that I've published or another publisher that liked the work but can't take it on, so they refer them to me. And so I mean, just like with anything else, if someone that I really admire and care about is recommending, I tend to take a harder look at that. Um, and especially if it's someone that I've worked with and that I've loved working with. And then in terms of like the final decision, it comes down to a few different things. Honestly, like one of the huge things for me is just the personal connection. Like, I don't want to work with assholes or people that are going to be difficult, pain in my butt, um, because it's again, I'm literally not getting paid to do this. I'm, in most cases, paying, like, it's a lot of time and energy, and like you said, I do it because it makes me happy. Well, it doesn't make me happy to work with someone that sucks. So,
Okay, but wait,
that's a
I
big
want to
thing.
differentiate a little thing there. Being an asshole, that's a personality trait. Totally
Mhm.
understand that. I was a bit of an arrogant little shit in my youth. I think I've become a little nicer. But the other part of being difficult, what
Mhm.
constitutes like being a difficult person to work with? Because like being an asshole is one thing, but being hard to work with is a different
Sure.
thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Being an asshole is a hard line barrier. I'm not interested. I don't want
Fair.
any assholes in my life, period. Difficult to work with, I think that so I could be more specific and say it's really important for me to be collaborative with the artist. So if someone's like, "This is how I want it and this is the only way," like, I'm not interested in, like, taking orders and just shipping something off, I want it to be collaborative. I want, us to come work together to come up with the best ideas and iterate and kind of, be creative together, whether that's me and the artist or the designer and the artist or all 3 of us. So that's important. And I think, yeah, so someone that's, like, just open-minded, like, wants and is appreciative of all of this work, that's helpful too. Not like an entitled kind of like, "You're my publisher and you gotta do blah, 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 blah," like, that doesn't really feel good.
Well,
That's not
that is the
enjoyable.
traditional idea of it. Like, I mean, back in the day, if an artist was at such a point in their career that they were having a book published, it was often that the publisher like wanted them so badly that they could be sort of demanding and all this. But these days, with all these sort of boutique presses and all these great presses around, like you can be more sort of playful with it, and more fun with it, and more experimental with it than ever in the past. Because I mean, in the past, it was coffee table books, and
Right.
and so like they were things that were produced to fill up a coffee table and to like stand the test of time kind of thing. Whereas now they're like, you like, as an artist, like I've done books in my career and I love making books because you can be so much more playful. You don't have to do a huge body of work to create a book. It can be just like a fun little set of 15, 20 images and you're like, done, cohesive idea, story, and
Yeah.
and then move on. I love the format of it. I think it's great, but it's still a hard format to work in because part of it is like it's great to find a publisher such as yourself, collaborate, do all that, and the hard part is how do you then get it to the buyers?
That is hard.
Yeah. I mean, publishing a book is a great thing on your CV. It's a lovely thing to have in your portfolio. Lovely to have a book produced. I mean, it's one of those great milestones in most creative people's lives. But the point of them is you really want to get them into the hands of people, and that is the huge difficulty because like a lot of people are doing like self-publishing, but they don't
Mhm.
really understand the fact that like self-publishing is great. You have the book physically, that's marvelous, but how do you get it from your garage to people's homes?
Yeah. Yes. And that's when you need a personal brand and
Yes,
people that are following
and a
you and interested
strategist.
in your work. Yeah, exactly, exactly.
So I mean, so what's something about like do you work with distributors?
I do. I have a distributor, which is new in the last couple of years, and to be honest, it's a nightmare. I don't know if it's something that I wanna continue doing. I mean, that's another thing that I think is incredibly, mis there's just a huge misconception about it with artists. So, a lot of artists wanna work with a publisher that has distribution. And it doesn't work like you think it works. It doesn't mean that if your artist that your publisher has a distributor, that your book is gonna be in every bookstore around the world. It just isn't that way. Um, I, as the publisher, have to do an insane amount of work to get my books and their interior spreads and their metadata and keywords and basic codes and all of this input into the system for my distributor. I have to pitch the titles to the salespeople almost a year before they come out, which is also not, I haven't I mean, there are times where I'm like, "It's a book about this, and that's about all we got right now." So have to do all of that, and then those salespeople have to sell it to their people who are gonna wanna stock it in their bookstore. It's very it's very haphazard, and then if they do and it sells, we get, like, $4 for the book, like, so but the amount that comes back to me as a publisher for sale is pennies on the dollar. So and honestly, like, their biggest buyer is Amazon. So the other way would just be to list it on Amazon myself and bypass, just an enormous amount of work, and still not get that much money per book, but whatever. So at this stage, honestly, I hope my distributor is not listening.
You haven't mentioned their name, so that's good.
It's basically like a really inconvenient warehousing option. It's, like, really great that when the books come in, they get sent to this warehouse in Tennessee instead of my super street steep residential driveway, which is always an issue, and I have more room in my garage for a second car, but other than that, it's kind of a shit show, and on the one hand, like, great, more artists are interested in publishing with me because I have this distribution, which is kind of bullshit, but I mean, I have it, but it's bullshit for everybody. It's not, unique to me. Um, but I also don't wanna keep up the pace of publishing this many books a year, so maybe it's a good, weeder out of I mean, I think it's also just kind of the reality of, like you said, I'm a boutique publisher. I'm only printing 300 or 500 copies of a book, and I don't need a distributor, like, it's really just to make the artists feel better about things, but it's not and I tell them that, I'm like, "I have a distributor, but it'll be listed on Amazon either way," you know?
Well, you do know as a counselor that just like stroking our egos and making us feel better is part of your job.
Yeah, but it's also delivering hard truths. The chances of you going to some small bookstore in Wichita and seeing your book there are very, very slim. Unless I mean, and that's the other option, right? Like, I can create and it would probably be better and maybe less time to, like, compile a list of booksellers around the US specifically that sell art books and sell photography books and build relationships with them and send them, examples, like, of a new title every time they come in. It wouldn't cost more money than what I'm getting paid now, and it wouldn't be more time, and then they could actually get into, cooler places. I'm considering that.
I mean, it's a hard one because, like, some of the best places in my mind, like, if I were to think of, like, okay, if I published a book, where would I want it to be? I would want it to be in museum gift shops.
Mhm.
I think, like, that's the primo place where people buy art books.
It is, and also, most museum gift shops are not going to carry the books of emerging artists, which is what I'm publishing, you know? They're gonna carry either the book of someone that's in the current exhibition or Ansel Adams and Edward Weston and, like, big name artists. So, like, the High Museum, which is local in Atlanta, they currently well, they have one of my books because Alex Harris was just exhibited there, and he's part of Picturing the South, but I went in the bookstore last month, and they didn't have any in there, and no one's calling me saying, "Oh, we need more Alex Harris books." They're like, "That exhibition's over." So there. I mean, so yes, it would be great to be in museum gift shops, but the likelihood of your book, MoMA looking at my catalog and ordering any for their gift shop is 0 because they don't know the artists.
It's a hard balance. I mean, because you want to get that exposure through those kinds of opportunities, but you can't get those opportunities unless you get sort of like named artists. But again, named artists won't work with you until you have those opportunities available to. It's such a horrible cycle.
Yeah, and, and I can't offer what Steidl can, like
Nobody can offer what Steidl can offer. Like, just to be clear.
True. And if one of my artists is in a museum show, those museums regularly reach out to me directly and say, "We'd like to order books for our, thing," or galleries do if they have exhibitions coming. So there's really no benefit to having the distributor at that point. Yeah, I should just get rid of distribution. Thanks for helping me think this through.
I'm glad to be your sounding board. That's
Mhm,
lovely.
mhm. Yeah. I'm glad the whole world's gonna be able to hear.
Well, it's actually nice to hear somebody sort of think through the logistics of a choice, because a lot of times all we hear about is the end decision, but we don't hear about
Mhm.
the rationale of why somebody chooses to do this or that. And I like hearing that kind of stuff, because then it helps me to be a little bit more educated on some of the pros and cons of things that I might need to do the same choice in the future. So thank you.
And it feels kind of fake for me, it's like, "Oh, I have a distributor," which was a lot of work to get it. So, also, when you get rid of it, that's a bad thing. I mean, I don't think you can go back. But, it's like, "Oh, I wanna be able to tell artists that I have distribution," and then I get into it, and I'm like, "Oh, I can say it, but it's really not what they think it is," you know?
Well, so moving forward, are there any sort of advice, sort of things that you can give to creative people to that desire to be part of the publishing machine? I don't know how better to put it. Like, I don't want to like, I don't want to downplay it, because like I've got books that I'm still looking for publishers for, which I'd be happy to send them to you. But no, I'm
I'll
totally
review
kidding.
them
Sort
quarterly.
of. Yeah,
I
quarterly. Yeah,
I
lovely.
respond to every submission.
Yeah, no, it's funny because like it's hard. A lot of artists like myself, like I have probably, if I said I went through my whole career, I probably have like 7 to 9 books that I could produce. But the amount of effort just to even put it together into a proposal
Mhm.
is really hard, because you've got to not only put imagery together to propose to a publisher, but you've also got to write some text, which I hate writing text. That's a whole different
Mhm.
issue in and of itself. And so, like, that whole proposal of even trying to get a publisher to even find some interest in your work is an entire sort of sub industry in and of itself, because that's hard.
Yeah. And I mean, for me, I'm not looking for a formal proposal like that. I don't like it when someone's like, "Hey, I'm a photographer and I'd love to make a book. Here's my Instagram if you want to check out some of my images." Okay, a little bit more context than that. Or if they say, "Look at my website," and I'm like, "What project specifically are you looking for?" But I also don't need like a fully designed, PDF. Although, I mean, in some cases, I'm like, "Wow, this is great. This is like 80% of the way there." And in some cases, I'm like, "I really like the images, but I don't like any of these design choices." Like, are you open to, like, literally, starting from the beginning? Um, Honestly, a lot of the projects, or I would say a handful of the projects that I've taken on have been from doing some online portfolio reviews, like during COVID, um, where you're able to talk to the artist and you can see what that rapport is like and ask them questions in real time. And so that's honestly been a great thing, and feels a little bit like you're kind of bypassing just a cold email stage of things. It's not quite a, like, recommendation from someone that you've worked with before, but it's nice.
Yeah. That cold email is horribly intimidating in so many ways. I mean, in every parts of our career. Like, I mean, even you as a publisher, I'm sure you have to do cold emails to people to have the books in their whatever kind of like.
Sure.
Yeah, it's a daunting part of this career.
Yes. Yeah, and it's hard to in anything, it's hard to stand out when you're just sending a random cold email. But, it's possible, and I've picked up work that way. But, yeah, I would just say that, doing research and figuring out, like, what publishers are what type of work they publish, I mean, I have a pretty wide aesthetic in terms of the type of work that I publish, but other publishers are very specific, and you're wasting your time if you're sending them a book of botanicals and they only do, like, very conceptual, modern, it's just not gonna be a fit. So, like, understanding that and trying to find a more personal connection I think would be probably the best way to go about it.
Okay. And do not approach you at your booth at a book fair.
I mean, if you bring gifts and, buy a bunch of
Buy a book.
books and,
Yeah.
like, flatter me a lot, and have really great work and are awesome and not an asshole and easy to work with, I could see that working out.
All right. Well, lovely. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to chat.
Thank you. This has been so fun. It's fun to be the guest.
Before you go, we would like to thank you for listening all the way to the end of the episode. We would also appreciate it if you would share the podcast with your friends, families, co-workers, and studio mates, anyone with an interest in the arts and creative industries. The building and strengthening of the arts and creative community, both today and in the future, is at the core of our mission for this podcast. You can listen, rate, and subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. We are produced by 5014. The audio was edited by CushAudio Services, and the music was created by Pete Bybee. The Wise Fool Art Podcast is supported in part by an EEA grant from Iceland, Liechtenstein, and Norway in an effort to work together for a green, competitive, and inclusive Europe. We would also like to thank our partners Hunt Kastner in Prague, Czech Republic, and Kunstsentrene i Norge in Norway. Links to EEA grants and our partner organizations are available in the show notes or on our website, wisefoolpod.com.